In 2018, the National Opera Studio commissioned 1240, 12 new arias by 12 composers and 12 librettists for 12 singers, to mark its 40th anniversary year. A follow-up project, 1242, was conceived 2 years later, with Collaboration the name of the game. The singers were partnered with an exciting and diverse hand-picked team comprising a composer, a librettist and a pianist, who would collectively transform ideas drawn from the singer's life and experience into a centerpiece aria for an opera yet to be written. 1242 was due to culminate in performances at London's Hoxton Hall in June 2020, but in March, coronavirus struck and put paid to those plans. Reacting swiftly and determined not to abandon the project, 1242 turned digital. This documentary, produced almost entirely in quarantine, is an exploration of creative process, isolation, and connection.
I have another question. This is more about the musical part of it. How are we gonna explore that together? Will we talk about like rhythms? In this case, I mean, the approach that I would want to give it, of course, has to do where I come from. But I don't really know how that would work in the terms of actually making the music. Would that be us sharing parts of the music that Alex is composing, or would it be like sharing different rhythms of where we are inspired, or how would we do this? Come.
Okay, so that's a really good question. I met with Alex and David, and we spoke about exactly that, because it's a big question mark. Because also in that dynamic of actually creating the music, the roles will clarify. Like I was brought by David on my knowledge of Colombian folk music as a musician and also as a folk guitarist. So I could just come up with ideas, but also I need to have a meeting, I guess, with Juliet one-to-one and also with Alex, the three of us, talking about musical things, because it's such a big subject on how do we bring the Colombian element into the area. Would it be like more subtly about phrasings or hinted rhythms or color response or even sections in Spanish or Colombian folk story that we're going to use as a, I don't know, starting point? Is very general.
From my perspective, the notes are like the last part of the thinking almost. They're like the result of all of our thinking. And so whilst I love all of this talk about rhythms and we should start collecting them and talking about them, I feel like once we go down the road a little bit with the idea and the project and think and talk about what the piece is going to be about, what the heart of the piece is, the aria, and then how that fits into the broader thing, I feel like the music will then start to suggest itself to us. And that's normally how I would work once we start having the text and the theme and things. So I think it'll probably all happen in parallel at the same time, because it feels like quite an organic process this will be. But yeah, I feel like it'll happen somehow happening.
I agree. Like for me, is that yes, to understand what, like Juliet, what, I don't know if that's clear already or still like, you know, making sense of it. Like, what would you like to communicate? What would you like to say? A personal thing, a memory thing, a cultural thing, a dreamy thing, a parallel Colombia world in your mind that is infused with rhythms? Because then, again, if that is clear, maybe one of the Afro-Colombian rhythms is great, but it wouldn't connect so much with the actual heart of the story, or I don't know.
so point about you being an opera singer, I was kind of wondering how that plays into everything, because of course then that's a whole other level of...
I was 19, almost 20 years old, and I had no idea what opera was, because you never hear it. I just never hear that. Even though I grew up in the capital, I went to high school there and university, I still didn't know what it was. I've heard about it, maybe like the word, or I imagine like these commercials that sometimes there is this like big guy singing, and that was for me opera, that's it. So when I came into it, it becomes so separated from traditional Colombian music, or for anything that I thought it was Colombian. It's just so far from everything, that even nowadays, like thinking about how to combine it, I have a hard time thinking how to put them together.
That's interesting, and I am very interested in, I'm sure Alex and Camilo are, in the ways in which the music can be translated, but then the elements that can't be, because with all translation there are some things that cannot be translated. So I think that's also interesting to remember, kind of what has to change, or what is just has to stay as it was.
I think one of the big challenges of this piece is going to be working out as a team how we combine the Colombian influences and the Colombian musical influences, as well as cultural influences and subject matter, into an operatic idiom and into a sound world, and that is of me and feels like it's not pastiche or appropriating culture in any way. So I'm very excited about that challenge, actually.
One Christmas morning we had baby goats, which is really sweet.
What do you mean? As in they were a present? Or were they...
As in our goats have babies on Christmas.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was really sweet. But one of them got stuck because we made them a hut made out of pallets.
Okay.
And there were little gaps, in the pallets, because they've got
Like
got stuck in there and just died, so really depressing.
Oh dear.
It's all related to animals, really.
Yeah. I think
And we had this duck that was like a cross between a duck and a goose. and a turkey. He was so ugly that we called him Ugly.
Okay.
And we hadn't realised, but this poor duck had been attacked, and like all of under his wing was like maggots, and just like really not very good. So we had to chop his head off.
I mean, I think there's like quite like a savage ending to like these anecdotes.
I know, right? I hadn't realised.
It's sort of, but like in an entertaining way. I don't know. I feel like it could be quite a fun operatic storytelling character.
Yeah. The animals that we ended up with were often me and my mum having a soft spot for like the poor chickens that were in a cage in the heat, and we'd have to take them home. And the first lot of chickens that we got on the babies, they drowned because we didn't realise that a big bowl of water for chicks was a bad idea. Anyway, so that's one. But then across the way there was this donkey, and he was tied up from his neck to his foot.
Aww.
And he was like my best friend, and he spent hours chatting to this donkey. You see the old men with their carriages, bashing them with their sticks, and it used to break my heart.
Yeah.
I felt so sorry for him. One day I unhooked the thing, and obviously the donkey escaped, and the owners knew.
Okay. Yeah.
So I got the deep shit for that one.
I think like there's a ton of stuff, and I feel like you could probably do a very funny, something quite funny with it. Just like quite matter of fact, telling us about your life. I don't know. I find it funny, the way you talk about it. Just the sort of madness of these stories that to me is like a completely other world. And like quite absurd. It could sort of start as one thing and become something
How
else.
long is this aria? Like 5 minutes?
Yeah, I think it's 5 to 7 minutes. So leave people wanting more. But I feel like a bit like a kind of Fleabag-esque caper. Or like it could begin as you're telling us about your day, but then it turns out that you're actually talking to the mule. and
Yeah.
then like your parting gesture is like, go, you're free.
You're free, yeah.
I
Exactly.
don't know, did the mule have a name or that you can remember, or
It was something like donkey.
just yeah?
You know what I think?
Yeah.
It was not. I don't think I named him like. I can't remember. My mum would know. I was very young.
I'm sitting here on what seemed like one of the brightest days of the year, and I'm about to start setting Jeanne's wonderful libretto, which begins, "It is dark in here, in the gloomy halls of Hades." So I'm going to have to use my imagination. But that is wonderful, of course. And it's very exciting to get to this point, because now I actually have to do something. It's been wonderful talking with Jeanne and Sam, deciding our subject matter. We hit on an aria for Penelope, who is Odysseus' wife. And Penelope, while Odysseus went off on all his exciting adventures, stayed at home, effectively by herself for years and years and years. So it's easier than usual, I think, to identify with her. What I usually do, I'll read and read and read and read. I'll look up things. So asphodel, the flowers of Hades, I've been looking at pictures on the internet of them. And everything about them, the whiteness, the texture of the flowers, all of those things, I think, how can I translate that in music? I often don't really understand poetry or the text I'm setting completely until I've set it. And I guess that's good, because I guess that means the music is doing something. Yeah, so I'm going to sit and I'm gonna... It's very hard to start. It's incredibly, incredibly hard to get going. Why is it so frightening? That's probably overdoing it a bit. But why is it so hard to get going when it's all you want to do? And then at the moment I feel like I'm finding ways to avoid doing it. But I have nothing left to do apart from this. So I shall have a little play on the piano, a little sing, a little read, a little underlining of words, and we'll see where we go.
So we're on day 5 of the lockdown.
We're on day 7.
Eliza and I were lucky enough to
lockdown.
meet in person.
I did start trying to record a
today.
video yesterday, but
Today was
I'd forgotten that because
it's
it's
feeling a
Saturday.
bit of a slog.
The division of childcare is not quite
It feels very heavy.
clean cut.
The atmosphere
as
feels
it is
very
on
heavy.
Mondays. Not that everything is clean cut at the moment, but
My brain feels quite foggy, and it's feeling a bit like Groundhog Day. Maybe I should... Oh no, I just spilled coffee everywhere. We're good at self-isolating. It's ideal writing time. I quite like not feeling the pressure to go out and do things and just, do my work. However, that I also feel immensely guilty about finding a positive. I also have a cup of tea, which is crucial.
since my conversation with Eliza, things have moved on a lot. I left it on Friday, halfway through a list. Everything is so generative, dualities. Eliza says something to me. I feel like one side is very safe, functional. The other side is something we find harder to describe. So many ghosts. When I was speaking to Eliza, it felt like the words that she for every sort of the key adjectives thing, that she had this. The way she go in that direction, and also let's stay here, which I really identify with. That's the tension that makes for interesting drama. Okay, so I've got on this list the sound of a distant cannon, a large bell, the cry of the bittern, gazing at a painting, large patches of colour, angels,
something
birds,
glittering,
echoes,
something
I've got words for
luminous,
chanting and
too bright.
mine
light,
is kind of a manic
and
associative
intuition,
game.
summoning.
You
as well.
you kind of create all this
Secretive,
foliage in a way that
inconspicuous,
you're
inaccessible,
dragging with
extremely
you,
sensitive
and then
to
things
disturbance,
fall
stand up
away,
straight,
fall away,
almost
fall away, and then
perpendicular.
you arrive
To
at this
maintain
place and you
balance
look
while
at what you
keeping
have,
attention wired
and it's
to take surveillance pose,
reduced enough
still posture,
that it's something
correct
to work
neck.
with, and then you keep
On the
whittling
bank of
down,
the
whittling
lagoon,
down.
head bent forward, studiously watching the water.
Yeah, a lot of my process involves looking at etymologies because I'm a massive geek in that way, and I find that they often pull up kind of
Boom is Eliza's surname.
quite surprising.
Boom is also
avenues to go
the
down.
usual word for the cry of the bittern, which is a large bird belonging to the heron family. Apparently these birds are extremely sensitive to disturbance, and when we met, Eliza told me how hard it had been to leave her family and her close-knit community in New Zealand to come here and sing. And she said that there had been times when she'd actually wanted the singing to stop. The bittern will sometimes flatten its chest completely to the ground and use its camouflaged plumage to blend into the background. So I'm circling the word chest. As well as that part of the human body enclosed by ribs and breastbone, a chest is a box for safe custody, safekeeping, responsibility, protection, to protect oneself by camouflage. So that leads me on to techniques for the conveyance of feeling. Conveyance, carriage, to carry meaning, to be carried away by one's voice, to bear from one place to another, and the cost of carrying. Power, ability, capacity, execution, anything in the hand, the body, or any part of it. A burden, a quantity definite or indefinite. Leaves and branches carried away by a stag with his antlers when they're passing through a thicket or wood. That really sparked something. So I've arrived at this idea that, and this is obviously through conversation, email, mostly, with Eliza and Emma Ruth. I've called the protagonist Celeste because in all of my research, celestial bodies kept coming up over and over again, so I figured that was a sign. So in this world that she inhabits, there is a carrier whose role it is to maintain societal equilibrium. His or her role is to sing the longings or the hurts or the kind of overwhelming sadnesses of people who can't bear to hold those feelings themselves. I mean, really not bear. And each generation, the carrier is secured by means of an ancient rite that takes place on a particular night at dusk. And it involves the pilgrimage of a stag who makes this pilgrimage to the site of
so there's this rite
callback passage. And every community in the land congregates and they sing their sacred song. And something happens on that night to make every voice in the land have a kind of substance. So something kind of tangible. And the idea is that this stag or whatever makes its way across the land. It collects these wisps of voice, and no voice shares the same materiality. Some voices are too heavy to snag, some are too thin, some voices are like, I was thinking like gossamer, so light and yet with real sticking power, surprising strength. Those are the voices that are most likely to catch. The further the stag walks, the more it gathers, and then it reaches its end point and it's wreathed in, leaves and feathers and whatever, all this kind of, I want to say, paraphernalia of the land and bits of voice. And it shakes its head of all this foliage, and then everything falls away but a single thread of voice. And that single thread that's left determines who will be. I also really like that idea of the stag and its carriage and what falls away and what stays, because it feels a bit like the writing of
balance,
an aria,
collapse,
or the writing of a libretto,
suspension,
in the larger sense,
movement,
and the putting together of a synopsis, because you have all this stuff. And when you work
surrender,
by association,
unity,
for a long time I really I tried not to do that because I felt that it was
loneliness.
Just don't know why, I just thought it wasn't the right thing to do.
Vulnerability,
and then
matter.
Then I realised, like,
Spirit.
oh, that's okay, because
Colour.
I have a process
Colour.
by which it falls away and,
Closed.
you know, the work emerges. Anyway, so, okay, so I've arrived at something.
Open.
I've got this continuous feedback loop in my mind, thinking, you know, there's lots of more practical things about this project that are really important. You know, showing off Sam's wonderful melodic ability to its max, writing a piano part that's different but sight readable. You know, so, and I also want to make it well crafted in a way that she doesn't have to worry about picking a note out of the air when it doesn't have to be picked out of the air, when it could be cued, or whether it could be preceded by an interval that, such as an octave or something like that, which means you can hit that top note without having to worry too much. So you can put all your effort into the music, and I find it really interesting when I'm writing, you know, that balance between writing whatever I want to write and thinking of my performers who are human beings who are perhaps in a nervous situation in this project because it's an audition aria. Yeah, I'm getting somewhere after all, which is good.
From all my notes, I wrote everything that Juliet was saying on our meeting on Saturday. Mm-hmm. So one is, it would be good to have something representing in and out that very strong Afro-Colombian heritage, which is from the coast. Mm-hmm. But she was born in Bogota, which is the center, and she grew up in Bogota. And it couldn't be more different. The temperature is completely different. The altitude is different. The accent, the way they behave, everything is different. So mm-hmm. the music also reflects this. So mm-hmm. I chose 3 rhythms to share from the center of the country, from Bogota, where we are from. Mm-hmm. And the set of instruments is very European as well. Like at the time the Spaniards came, and in Europe you had the standard violin 1, violin 2, viola and cello. And then a few years after, in the center of Colombia, you have mandolin 1, or we would call it bandola, mandolin 2, tiple, which is a local instrument with 12 strings, and guitar, playing like what the cello would do. So you see all these sort of remains of the European tradition, but they transform into the local thing. And it, when you hear it, like people associate it with like Brazilian choro music, which is very virtuoso and full of notes. And then that starts becoming more traditional when you add percussion and you get things. And that in contrast with the very African sort of dominated sounding music from the coast. So this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna share my screen.
Oh, cool.
Oh, technology.
And do this.
Whoa!
Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if this is very big or not, but so what I wrote in here is, from Juliet's musical background could be hinted by 2 main sources. One, which is the music from the Caribbean coast, what I just mentioned, and music from the center of the country. Yeah. And then I listed, because there's so many rhythms and style, I just listed options depending on what the text would be or the dramatic moment in the story is. The one that she just mentioned is called Bullerengue, which is this one. Is like the clear example of call and response, and this one, this style, it could be very dramatic. So the one example I put here will show us exactly what she means. Where is here? This is a song that is very famous. One main story is very dramatic. You could be saying anything about suffering, I don't know, and then call and response from top to end.
That could be hinted in the piano, the accompaniment, I don't know. Main singer here. And choral response here.
And then the refrain. Melody continues. Refrain. Melody. So I started off my creative process by improvising at the piano around some of the transcriptions I made of the folk music that Camilo had shared with me. And this was really to sort of get to know the music a little bit more and start to develop it and put it into my own sort of voice and my own language a little bit. But not with any pressure to sort of create anything new from that, but just to sort of explore and play a little bit with this music that's quite new to me. The harmony sort of shifts between narrow sort of framework of pitches into quite crushed and diminished places, which is something I had observed and found interesting in some of the music examples that Camilo had shared. So I think that where I've arrived at is somewhere directly inspired by folk music and traditional music of Colombia, but not directly emulating or mimicking it.
I think Nick and I do have so much in common. Nick, obviously, as a writer, she's thinking vertically down the page. And obviously, as a composer, I'm thinking temporally through from left to right, fully. So she's thinking how the end of each sentence lands and its relationship to the sentence above. And I'm thinking horizontally, as the music's travelling across the page, how time is passing and how time is being measured. So I actually get all of her text and I chop it all up and I pin it horizontally as it may appear temporally within a score. I think I also think quite graphically in terms of physical presence within a space and how to inhabit that space and how big is the space that I'm creating around the voice at any one given moment. Then that shifting of light and shade and focus and imbalance plays a huge part in almost a sort of mini stage directions in my head. And I know that's the same for Nick, so she thinks about, surfaces and how do things come into contact with a surface? Is it a hard contact? Is it soft? Are the edges blurred? Is there a delineating, defined border, or is one thing merging into another? And that sort of sense of the edges, I think you get to know yourself very well when you go to the edges and you just sort of find out what the interaction is and where your lines are, where your boundaries are. And that's a really lovely thing to play with musically as well. Specifically with this text, I was really carefully writing for Eliza. So when we'd spent time at the opera studio together, she had discussed various kind of qualities of her voice in different registers. Some of the much quieter, floating sounds that could be achieved quite high, being that she's a high soprano, as well as like a sort of a central pitch of an E flat, which is really big and warm. And so I sort of have like a map of her voice, which then means when I'm looking at the text, I was able to pin that map of her voice onto the text along with the kind of the meaning behind this aria. So I could then place where in her voice she was going to sing certain passages. One of the words that Nick has been really intrigued by from the beginning is the word carriage. One of the definitions was these leaves and branches being carried away by a stag with his antlers when passing through a thicket or a wood. So that kind of affected how much weight I was going to use in her voice as well. The aria wanted to open with a sort of sense of intrepidation and vulnerability and fragility and weightlessness. So there was a real imbalance and unanchored feeling in the music and also in her voice. And then as the aria moves on, she gathers more and more weight, and she gains even more vulnerability. But the shape of the aria then reaches its sort of peak about 3/4 halfway through, when she gets a taste of her ability to sing. And with that meant obviously as the aria went on, the setting of the text became stronger and brighter and higher, as she just rediscovered her beautiful power in her voice, and she releases her upper register. So even the register of the text and how it's been set is very specifically planned, if you like. The first thing I do is go straight to setting the text, but not thinking about it temporally, but thinking about it instead as just what are the pictures, what are the outlines of this phrase, and how is it going to be sung? And then having a really clear idea of the colour and the pitch and the harmony of each of these phrases, and then how they relate to one another, means that I can set a very secure baseline and sort of pin down harmonic anchors, tonal centres within the piece that themselves function within relationship to one another. So there's a sort of reoccurring bell figuration that sort of marks out time in this aria, and they actually function cadentially as a perfect cadence. So the opening gesture is sort of around a tonal centre of a G, and then it moves to a tonal centre of an A. So sort of 4/5 chord progression. And then the final one lands us back to a D, so sort of the 5/1 from the A. And I think that then underpins the kind of anchors of where I'm travelling from, but how I go about that and how I get there is then more through composed and at the piano when I'm working out the internal workings of the harmony. The melodic line is obviously the foreground. The bass line is what's holding it down, and then everything that happens in between has to be paced very carefully, both in its intensity and its harmonic speed. So in order at the opening to get this sort of sense of hovering or striving for motion, the harmony can't be constantly changing. It has to be moving within itself. So that already then gives you a really safe bed to collect this small group of harmonic intervals and sound world. And then it's thinking about gesture and how to portray that within an orchestral setting, which sonorities to use, which combinations, which timbres, what colours, what dynamics. But you've got a tempo and a harmonic world set up, and you've got a controlling extra musical concept of this sense of anticipation or shifting and striving for motion that's not yet achieved. So with all of those things playing off with each other, you end up being able to create something that sits in that world and ticks all those boxes.
Penelope, she's so witty. She's speaking to us from Hades. She's dead and she's speaking to us from beyond the grave, but she still manages to have these wonderful flashes of humour. You know, it's dark in Hades, but the advantages are if you see somebody that you don't want to see, it's dark, so they don't see you. So I want to express that sort of wit throughout. Anyway, I've been thinking, I've just been twiddling around basically, because that's the way I start, you know. So I'm thinking about some kind of accompaniment based perhaps on the rhythm of the word asphodel, like this sort of. I'm coming up with something like yeah. Just something very lilting that I can maybe. Yeah, trying to get the darkness of Hades. There's the asphodel, Penelope's sense of wit, and that's all I've managed to come up with today in about 3 hours. But you never know. I'm hoping it's going to percolate overnight, and I'm going to wake up full of inspiration, and it will all flow easily. That does actually happen quite often to me, so I've got a good chance. So yes, more and on.
Firstly, Theo, thank you so much for the text. It's such a beautifully written text. I think it really encapsulates a lot of what we were talking about in that first meeting all those weeks ago. Theo, I don't know if you want to add anything about your text specifically.
I think the poem itself is kind of a pivotal moment in the middle of the text. So what comes after the poem is sung should reflect on the poem itself. And what comes before the poem kind of reflects on the main character's current circumstances, being trapped in London. So yeah, there's a little bit of a development arc there. And it's precisely because he has sung the poem that after the poem, he is able to reflect on how the poem connects to his current situation.
Definitely. And so for me, I guess the thing which was guiding the musical arc was essentially this sense of, I guess, a tension between isolation and connection, which I think is kind of relevant to our current circumstances, not least the sense that we're having this call, and in 2 weeks' time if we had another call, it would be between the UK, Singapore and China, and so that sense of isolation and also being able to navigate that is vaguely what this music is trying to do. The music is framed by these 2 solo sections of you singing without the piano accompaniment.
At the beginning. Yeah,
exactly, and at the very end.
Yes.
And so those sections are really kind of about you as a singer in reality. It's about you waking up in your room by yourself without anyone there. And so it's only really when we get towards the recitation of the Chinese poem that you do begin to get a sense that there is a way to reconcile this isolation, and there is a way to find connection despite the situation that you're in. That is never reconciled fully, it's never resolved, which is why you then go back into that kind of solo section at the very end where the piano again has disappeared, and you're kind of back in your room, I guess, and you realise that this isolation is still very much going on. And so throughout the bits where there are piano and voice together, they never quite align fully, both in terms of the harmony and in terms of the way in which there's a dialogue, I guess, between the piano and voice. But
I saw that part.
But yeah, I mean, I guess a really practical point, Shangzi, is how did you feel, especially in terms of the Chinese poem? Is the stuff like the range and the phrase lengths, are they okay for you?
For me, I just noticed that as a singer, I saw that B natural and the really diminuendo A natural.
that was a very specific.
And I saw you wrote down the head voice. Okay.
Is that possible? If it's not, that's totally fine.
It's because he's very confident in your abilities, Sanjay.
Exactly. Exactly. I was listening to your virtual recording of the Piccini that I found on YouTube. I was just trying to get your voice in my head, basically, when I was writing the music, and I felt there was potential for you to do a quiet diminuendo on top A.
Actually, I really like this. I think it's a really challenge for me. It's a really challenge for me.
I mean, it's always a nerve-wracking part for the composer kind of showing the music for the first time to the performer, and having someone who's so open and engaged is a real privilege, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
but,
it's also nerve-wracking for the writer to share the music with the composer. That. So I think, well, going forward, Shang-Chi, let us know anything that we can do to support you in being able to sing this piece kind of to the best of your spirit and your ability, and we will try our best to make that possible. Yeah. That's good.
Great. Well, I think yes, we have less than a minute. Okay, cool. All right, thanks so much, guys. Be in touch soon.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
So I went to sleep, and I have actually. Yeah, I've got something, and I've got my little introduction. It's not so much an introduction as the beginning, in fact. It is dark in the gloomy halls of Hades. It is dark in here. Excuse the intonation of the piano. It's not been tuned in a while. Yeah, that's what I've got so far.
It's good to see you. I'm a railroad man, and I'd like to tell you something about our railroad and what we're doing on it. It had a job waiting for it from the beginning. Power on the move, looking for wilderness to eat up. Its smoke signals said, we're coming with everything you need to clear a forest, make a homestead, build a town. It said, we're coming to keep your cities fed, your industries alive and growing. A heavy load to carry, carrying the country on its back.
This project means a lot to me because what I wanted was to show the world a different face of Mexico that people doesn't know. I think nowadays what everyone hears about Mexico is only the bad news. Why is like everywhere I go, people ask me about the narcotraficants and like the violence and this and that, you know? And in my head, I determined that I didn't want to speak about that anymore, you know? But then we started talking about our ancestors and like where we come from and how different and at the same time similar we are, you know. And it was very interesting because as soon as we started talking about the issues in our country, I realized that our job as communicators is to portray these messages and show them in a human way, you know, because sometimes the news, what they want is to call attention, you know, they're sensationalists. So we wanted to stay away from that and rather show the immigration problem, which is massive and big, you know, and people don't really talk about that, but they started talking about it because Donald Trump and because of the, you know, the huge caravan that was going to the United States and passed through Mexico, you know. And we mentioned even the mythological part of Mexico, you know, like all these legends and like tales, you know, from the ancient civilizations and stuff. And somehow we came to a middle ground when we merged all of these, you know, the mythological side with the human side, with the social issue that we need to raise a voice about, you know. So after that meeting, I was really shocked in a good way, and I was really inspired by that meeting because I understood that being an opera singer is, you know, to communicate in a human way so that the other can relate, you know.
Oh yeah, this is one of the things that art can do. You know, you can give voice to people that or not considered even human sometimes. And what attracted me of this project was precisely that. And as we know, there's no justice for them because the legal system doesn't work in Mexico. And these people are so desperate, just so desperate to have a normal life, to have food. Like Dionisio says, his dream is to feed his family in our piece. His dream is just that, to be able that no one in his family goes hungry, and that they have a roof, and that they have a toilet, a bathroom. That's all he wants. It's as simple as that.
Yes, exactly. And I feel that sometimes, even though it sounds rude, it's nice to feel that sensation of making the public that has the pleasure and the privilege to have money to pay for a ticket to go amuse themselves, to feel a bit uncomfortable. I think that's a privilege that we as artists have, to bring these stories out, to make an impact on someone that has so many privileges, and at least to make them aware of a different reality, that.
So you said just something, a very important word you use in what you just said, to feel them uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very important for me. And this is why I'm writing the way I've written the music.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I'm asking you to do strange things with your voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just beautiful music, because the situation is not.
It's not suitable for beautiful music indeed. No, yes.
No. Yes. And I think I felt that our story has room to grow into a bigger project. In the future, if we have the opportunity, this is an idea that I would like to expand into a bigger story.
Yes, it's fascinating that this little short story, actually, when I read even the script, the libretto, I was craving for more. I was intrigued to find out what happens to him and his story.
And also where he comes from. So to be able to explain why he has to make the journey, how he gets on that train. Because our story starts when he's already on the train.
Mm-hmm.
There's quite a lot of things in YouTube about the subject matter, and it's pretty awful what happens. There's two cargo trains. One goes the shortest way, which is the Gulf Coast,
mm-hmm.
and the other one, longer one, that goes the other way. And the shorter one became so dangerous because of all these thieves. That's why in our story he's left with no shoes, with no shirt, traveling in this cargo train in the middle of the desert, which gets very cold.
Exactly, yes. Being from the south, they have to cross the entire country, and the journey takes them to the north border with the United States, where Dionisio gets his son taken away from him, and he gets arrested.
Well, I don't know if he gets arrested.
That's true.
Yes, we don't know. What these immigrants do, they leave the children to be picked up by the immigration officers, because once they are in detention sentence, they ask him all sorts of questions. Why did you come to the United States? And another question is there a relative already in the United States? So they have, many of these children have sewn into their clothing the telephone number of that relative. So if the immigration officers have this number of this person they can contact, then they hand them over to this person, or the legal proceedings start, so they can stay there. If they're traveling with an adult, which is the case of our story, because Dionisio, his son is 5 years old, so he leaves his son to be taken by the immigration officers, so he can try and cross illegally himself. The last thing he thinks is, if I don't leave now, they're gonna deport me. And he's terrified of that because he's done this journey and he also wants to cross. Because the maze they face when they're already on the other side, the legal journey that starts once they're there. Even the children, it's horrendous. It's another nightmare.
We're discussing your standard of living and comfort. We're discussing your better standard of living and your greater comfort tomorrow. You can't have them unless you know the facts. Thank you.
Just right now, there's a bit of a recit that I'm trying to work out how to do. The advantages about it being dark in Hades, she's talking about. So advantages. If you see someone you'd rather not speak to, you can pretend you haven't recognised them. If you see someone you'd rather not speak to, you can pretend you haven't recognised them. 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 Recognise them. Recognise them. That's too low, obviously. Advantages. If you see someone you'd rather not speak to, you can pretend. Yeah, this is my caution, I'm a bit concerned that's too light for Hades, but I'm trying to balance the darkness and the murk of Hades with the advantages about being in Hades, which I see as a rather, every cloud sort of thing, If you see someone you'd rather not speak to, you can pretend. You can pretend you haven't recognised them. Recognise them. Recognise them. Yeah. You can pretend you haven't recognised them. Recognise them. Recognise them. I always have to bear in mind when you're doing something like that. 4 big intervals in a row, is it? Or 3, whatever. And there's me with my sort of crappy singing voice. I can do that because I'm sounding crap. But if a proper singer is singing that, maybe that's not so idiomatic. I don't know. Or maybe it's fine. Maybe it's fine. Maybe I'm worrying too much. I spend a lot of my time thinking I'm worrying too much, and a lot of my time thinking I'm worrying too little. Recognize them. If you see someone you'd rather not speak to. I'm getting a bit posh here, and I'm thinking she's not going to be speaking like that, is she? Advantages. If you see someone you'd rather not speak to, you can pretend you haven't recognised them. You can pretend you haven't recognised them. I need some more chords, some more stuff going on in the piano than this, I think, because now I'm getting bored with my own music, and it hasn't even been performed yet, so that's not a good sign. But we still get there.
Well, I mean, personally for me, I've not touched a real piano in 15 weeks. So my main target is just to remember what it feels like playing it and making sure I'm not too loud. I don't think I've not touched a piano in this long a period of time. And it is actually something that worries me a tiny bit, is just what the response is going to be. And I think, Mari, you've been practicing on an upright, haven't you?
Yeah, I had an upright at home, and now back in London I have an electric piano. So, but it's still, I know a lot better than the situation you've been in. But I can't wait to play a grand. I just feel like I haven't been able to play a true pianissimo in weeks and weeks.
I've not been able to play a true fortissimo in weeks and weeks. But I mean, I think the singers have had a reasonable amount of coaching with Andrew to put this together, and I think some of the pieces the composers have created like a MIDI track for it, which is maybe robotic but at least accurate. So hopefully they have had all the tools to help kind of put things together, even if we can't do that for them at this time.
I know some of my singers, for example, really like to have like the piano, the vocal line played for them, and they really need to feel where it fits within the whole piece. So I've been making recordings. I actually just figured out the other day how to make like a recording of me playing the piano accompaniment, and then I've layered on top with like a Audacity or something on my computer the vocal line as well. So they basically get like a track of the piece. It's still difficult because, you know, they can't see, like they can't feel where someone's cueing, but I think it's at this stage probably about the most we can do for them at this point.
I have done some recordings actually for these pieces, and the thing that I found a bit tricky is that both of my pieces have long periods of time which have rest for me, and often with the fermata. So I just kind of have to wait and hope that we both come in at the same time. So it's just been interesting to learn new music without having that much contact with the person you're supposed to be creating the piece with. I think there's only kind of so much that you can do on your own before you're actually in the same room with them. So, so I'm really interested, and yeah, I'm interested to see how it's going to be all coming together next week.
In the experience I've had, I think I was quite lucky because my pieces were kind of spaced out when they were created, so I was able to focus on each one fairly well. So the first one, for example, there was quite a lot of back and forth, and maybe sometimes you even have to act as a little bit of a mediator if the singers maybe has some issues that they don't, you know, they're not happy with, but they need to find a better way to say it. Sometimes I think you have to sort of step in and be able to look at it from a very musical point of view.
There's a sense of wanting to also please the person who produced the piece. Like, if I play Mozart poorly, that's terrible, but he's dead. So, you know, it's not, I do feel a duty to composers who are not here anymore, but if someone's written something specifically for us, I want them to be happy, and I want them to feel like I've done as well as I could have with what they've given me. I genuinely like the pieces that have been written for the singers I'm working with. And I want them to be good. And I want everyone who's involved to feel like they have, you know, achieved what we could achieve. But
I just sent a few thoughts back to Shanu, who's Q's composer, and within like an hour and a half, she'd changed the score already, and she'd like adapted I didn't even expect half of it to be taken into consideration, but she clearly just wants, you know, it to come across really well. And speaking of markings, I mean, I haven't got any like instrumental markings, but she's the one who I felt it's just clearly a very like considered score, and everything is, I can completely kind of see what she wants and everything. It's pretty amazing too that Q's team they're all Korean, and so like I think, you know, the setting of the English and also just the use of it's all very impressive, like what they've made, and it's very personal to Q.
I think in a lot of cases, to David's credit, the teams were picked in a way that were very considerate, and it felt like there have been some frictions, but I think I can definitely see the thinking. David's kind of thought of why some people should be working with some singers, and I think he's made an effort to have people who can really offer something that is personal.
Right. Beginning?
I guess, yeah.
Start from the start.
I can play some stuff if it helps, but it obviously will be off rhythmically. But
Yeah.
if it helps to play chords between, I can do that.
A call for proposals said. We want, to develop transgender voices.
Good. You've got a bit more time on voices, haven't you? Transgender voices. You could even, if you could do parody Puccini, you would slide there, wouldn't you? Voices. Don't you think?
The job of a coach, I guess, is to help a singer, approach repertoire, how to use their voice as well as they can, what things are important stylistically and about the words that they're singing and so on. We think of coaching as kind of distinct from singing teaching, which is more about the kind of technical aspects, how to make the sound, how to make your voice work. My job, I reckon, is to help the singer use their technique that they have as best as they possibly can, and to make suggestions that work in specific places and so on.
Any notes?
Yeah, I think it's really good. There was one that was much better. My voice that morning was well. I really liked all this. I wondered about whether you need the gap after violin. Violin through my. You could do violin through my headphones. Might be more effective. And also, I know she's written it, but maybe the gap after head of headphones is a bit weird because I hear head. And then I hear phones, and then I put them together in retrospect. Do you know what I mean? Through my headphones. I'd suggest doing the last one a bit less.
Yeah, okay.
And I think it's clearer.
My job as a musician, well, I think generally, and as a coach particularly, is often about trying to figure out what the composer is getting at through the notation. So, okay, it says this, it says mezzo forte, why? What's the idea? Is the character angry? Is it forceful? Is it peaceful? Is it calm? And so on.
So do you think this very low stuff, the mocking, what is supposed to be kind of mock masculine? What's the, you said treading dangerously into waters.
Yeah. Well, I think, I know for a fact that this has been taken from a real proposal from a theatre.
Oh, excellent.
I think it refers directly to saying we want to develop transgender voices, and then they casted lots of cis people and no one trans was on the panel or had anything to do with anything.
So I think this sort of dig thing could be clearer then. It's, you're called for proposals. So it's more, I'm calling you out.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Zoom coaching is quite a new challenge because as anyone who's tried to make music over Zoom finds, there's an enormous lag. So it's basically impossible for me to play the piano and the singer to be singing at the same time. And so we approached that in different ways with different singers. Some of them had backing tracks, either backing tracks that were just generated from the music publishing software. Some of them had backing tracks made by their repetiteurs, which are really, really helpful to have. Others just sang a cappella or played little chords for themselves, depending on how proficient they were at the piano. So it was really my job just to listen and feed back. There are, of course, some limitations with the sound quality that you get through computer microphones and so on. And so I was very glad in this case to have some knowledge already of their voices and what they sounded like, because then I can give them more ideas about color and so on, knowing what they can actually do rather than necessarily just trusting what I'm hearing through the computer.
I like it. I think it's hard to tell on Zoom. I don't think it should be kind of aggressive. It's just being kind of slightly pompous, isn't it? Yeah. We want to develop. Yeah.
More of an accent, perhaps.
But that feels like the right kind of world, I think.
Well, it's 8 minutes to 10 on Sunday night, which is a rather stupid time to be working. But I've just got to the central point of the aria. Right now, my score it looks like a dog's dinner. I've got things half sketched, and I find composing really hard, and I find concentrating on composing really hard. So what I'm sort of trying to do with a piece of this length is sketch it all out, and then I can see it. I've done it. I am capable of doing this, because every time I start a piece, I think I'm never going to be able to write this. I've lost the ability to write music. Then I can see I've got evidence, but there's a lot of gaps. I need to clarify things. Sometimes I just scroll down notes, and because I've been singing it all the time, I know roughly what the rhythm is. I'll just jot down the odd word. Sometimes when I'm not sure if I like what I've written, I just figure around with other alternatives. So I like that F sharp at the end, and I'm not really sure quite why yet. I will find out at some point. But a way to see if it's the right note is to bung another note in at the end instead. And then if they all sound wrong, I have been known to go through all of the 12 notes as alternatives, and if they all sound right, then I know for some reason, which I'm bound to find out later, that F sharp is the right note. Anyway, at least I've got somewhere. At least I've done something. At least I haven't gone and sorted out my sock drawer for the 80th time, So I think I might stop there for the day and begin on Monday morning like most normal people.
Hey, Tom. Can you see us?
He did not connect to audio.
Can you see us?
Doesn't look like it.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, brilliant.
Never done this before, so forgive me.
Have you not?
No, this is my first one. I've not done anything like this. Look at this, I can move around.
Oh,
How about
no,
this?
stop it. I'm going to throw up.
No, is that bad? Sorry, folks. Sorry.
Great.
Yeah. So I was saying, Tom, I'm going to work with the recordings that Mari sent now. And then by tomorrow morning, you guys would have received an audio from me with the accompaniment backtrack only.
It's really interesting to have the composer there. I mean, we often say we've been working on Verdi or Puccini or Mozart or whatever, if only they were here and we could ask them and we'd know the answer to this question. But in a way, kind of secretly, I think we quite like the interpretative space of saying, well, we can't be quite sure what they were thinking, so there's more than one way of doing this. And in fairness, I think most composers are very open in that way to having their works interpreted. You write something, you give it to a performer, you get your say, but it's also it's a thing. Then it's out in the world. It takes wing.
Who is it that those we love and trust can trample all over dreams to dust? It cuts me, it cuts me, it cuts me like a knife.
Great. Again, your voice is just so incredibly beautiful that, the only problem that you're ever going to have as a singer is actually trying to make it less beautiful. Trying to make it less, I don't mean that as a criticism. I don't mean that you're not, you don't know exactly what you're doing. Yeah. You could, some of the greatest singing that we all know and love and hear have got those little, I don't want to say flaws in them, but that when you hear a singer who dares to not make something as beautiful, when they are singing beautifully, it has 10 times the impact.
Oh yeah.
Can you? I know it's a bit of a slow tempo, but. Let's try to find the right tone to bring. Can you make it more of a crescendo there and go right into that to bring around and make that one phrase just for me?
But would you like it to be a faster tempo in the recording?
Yeah, it can move along.
Sure.
It's wonderful with these projects that they were so bound up with the stories of the artists themselves.
because the singer knows their story so well, it's a question of making sure that that's really articulated clearly to the outside. So there were various of the arias where the singer would say to me, oh yeah, this is something very, very close to my heart. But I'm saying, yes, but I don't know your story. I need to see that.
Can trample all over dreams to dust. It cuts me, it cuts me, it cuts me like a knife.
That's it. That's it. And you'll all arrive at that moment there. You know, so the first part of it has to be, I mean, when you're performing it, you know, we need also on your face just to see that this is the most positive thoughts that you've had about the whole situation up to this point.
Yeah.
I can bring her around. Make the moment my own. This really is gonna work. This is gonna work. It's gonna work. I know it. And then suddenly, you know, you're stabbed in the heart because suddenly all those fears come crashing back. That's so much better than before.
Cool.
Yeah. It's all about, you know, acting and singing with your voice is all about making these sharp corners. It's, you know, rather than blending in, you know, it's like how you see a lot of, you know, sort of operatic acting or what passes for it. People kind of make these general gestures and they blend in everything. Sharp, all the way through. You've got such a beautiful lyric instrument, that's always going to be there. Yeah. But the more you can make these really sharp corners and delineation of intent, the better. I mean, that holds true with all music making, I'm convinced. You know, we can always sand the corners a little bit and smooth it out, but the sharp edges, really need to see those. You know, you've only got 5 minutes to tell your story to somebody who's never heard you or seen you. So, yeah. Anyway, great. I'll shut up.
This is very exciting.
Yes! I'm really nervous. You have to like it.
Okay, it is downloading. 16 seconds. Okay, so what I can do is play it from here and share it with everyone.
Ooh, we have some high moments. I'm so excited. It's not so high. It's okay.
Okay, we musicians tend to try to follow and read the score manically. Do we want to just listen to it and then follow the score?
Yes.
The thing is, you need the score for the words. Otherwise, it's just a flute playing a melody.
Okay, so I'm gonna share the screen with the sound.
I'm so excited!
Great, ladies and gentlemen, Fuda remembers.
Oh my God.
That was amazing. Well done.
Jesus.
That was great.
Oh,
What did you feel about it?
this is so emotional.
I know. It's really emotional. I had
There was a
goosebumps.
moment where we're like,
Yeah, I felt like there were moments also like, because this is the first time we have actually done it
all the way through.
all the way through.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
wow, that sounds really good.
And it's like, I think there were moments that during the rehearsal, we would do like a section, then stop, then go back, then work it. But then, like now it's, in my mind, it's a bit of like a connection of what's happening and what is it making me feel throughout the whole thing. Like the first time I said Shibu, like I wanted it to be like excitement, and then for some reason I got like a little bit scared also with the whole boo. Like I know what's coming, and it's like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm ready. It's like, but it was fun. There were moments also that I was completely out, and I wasn't sure how you felt me. Where was it? There was one part in particular that I was like, what is happening?
You're not supposed to admit that, Julia.
Ah, but it's.
I think you cope well with that. Totally. Are there any bits that you want to talk about in particular, or bits you want to go through again, or any questions at this point?
I mean, you probably noticed it right away, but that's not dot across equals 60.
No.
What we're doing.
That's my first question. How do you feel about the tempo?
Well, the thing is, it's a bit unsteady at the moment because we've been working on it slowly, just because I think it's hard for us having not been able to work together in the same room. I think it changes, especially for Juliet. I think it changes quite a lot of the how she finds where to come in and the rhythms.
Yeah.
Like I've always pictured it as like you're literally on a weird bus in Colombia, like going around these hills,
yes.
like you're about to like tip off the side of a
Yeah,
mountain.
that is accurate. Like I can already imagine it. I've been there, like knowing the type of bus that like, oh my God, you fear for your life, but also you just know it's gonna be okay. So it gives me like the image of going actually inside those little mountains and all of those little things that will eventually take you to this monstrous thing.
Yeah, but your feelings are quite expansive. You're looking out of the window at this landscape, and it's kind of like you're excited to get there. And I feel like that's what we need to get to, I suppose. It sounded at this tempo, it sounds a little bit too sort of wistful. I guess at the beginning I put bright yet wistful or something. It was too much on the wistful side, I guess. But I get in the second half of the piece, I'm totally fine if it holds back a little bit more, because by that point you're there.
I think that Juliet's.
You're in
it's up to
control.
Juliet.
I'm in control of the rhythm. Oh my God. This has been a real challenge rhythmically for me, Alex. But I think
That's good, though,
in the
right?
positive side. It's so good. My brain has been working hard.
I couldn't listen to all of those amazing Colombian references and put something in like 4/4 and like
No, but
boring rhythm.
I like this a lot because it's like once I sort of got where it was, which was like yesterday, last night, it sort of started making sense. Now I think it's more like just letting my body understand what my mind knows. Because also I think I practice so much with the medium that once now I'm hearing it with an actual instrument, there are things that are, I don't know, maybe more blurry or not as clear, or things I was listening to that I cannot listen when my own voice is like, ah! So it's just getting used to that feeling now.
Yeah.
I think there was, wait, let me check.
So this is my final update. I ended up writing that. I ended up really getting into it and sort of ploughing through it, really. All the ideas came sort of thick and fast, and I guess that's what happens when you've been thinking about something for a long time. So I sent the score off and a recording of me singing and playing to Jeanne last night, and I had a lovely message from her saying that she's very pleased, so that is a huge relief. And I can't wait to show it to Sam and get her input and feedback. And yeah, it's been a fabulous experience.
asphodel, it is dark. Advantages. If you see someone you'd rather not speak to, you can pretend you haven't recognized them. Pretty white flowers, asphodels, but after a while, asphodel, asphodel, asphodel. What a sprinkling of crocuses have been too much to expect. You do have to wonder who designed the place. Now that I'm dead, I know everything. My husband, many people have believed his version of events. Even I believed him from time to time. Hadn't I waited and waited and waited and waited and... Don't follow my example! I want to scream in your ears! Yes, yours! Our best times were spent in bed. Once he'd finished making love, he told me stories. Okay, I think that's it.
I thought
That's not going to get any closer.
No.
Yeah?
I think that had a big difference actually.
Yeah, I do too.
I think it was less manic. Does that make sense? I felt calmer in the second one. As in, like, I felt...
I think altogether you were more centered.
Yeah, centered. That's the word.
Is it on speaker?
It is.
Oh, there it is.
Hello.
Hi.
Cheryl, we've just finished. We've just finished recording.
How'd it go?
It was really good. Yeah, second take. It's great.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
How exciting.
Yeah. We're really, really excited to show it to you. So, yeah. I hope you're going to enjoy it.
Oh yeah, I bet I am. I'm excited. Yeah.
And if you want to write the whole thing, just feel free, and we'll be here to do it as a whole.
It'll be good, wouldn't it?
Yeah. No pressure. Okay. Well, I hopefully see you again soon. Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for everything.
Yes. Thank you so
It was
much.
great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.